So we're just looking at what can Canada hold for us. So as a prelude to this, is just to mention, which is quite clear in the minds of many persons, including those who are on this meeting, that the issue of migration has become a little bit complex in the last, say, 1 to 2 years, but much more concerning in the last 6 months. And different nations are re-strategizing on how to attract the best and the brightest to themselves, especially for those who have a problem of population and problem of, an economy that needs population to drive it. So this is why we're centering on Canada today, especially in the face of also very dynamic phase of immigration in many countries like the United States and United Kingdom. So in the recent time, some part of Eastern Europe and Canada has become the new safe haven in terms of immigration. So we won't talk about what is happening in the Middle East, where migration is very much unrefined, where it's difficult to get status as a foreigner. So migration is as old as mankind. You remember how the Israelites had to end up in Egypt. You remember even how Jesus Christ had to leave his comfort zone, all driven by some dynamics. Central to that is safety. It could be seeking comfort. It could be economic, for different reasons. So migration is as old as mankind, and it will never really stop because it's an idea that will outlive us. But as time unfolds, the dynamics of migration will continue to, change to meet current trends. I'm sure when people left in the time past, there were no things like passport, visas, and all whatnot. But over time, some of these things have had to be factored in. And we felt, okay, let's have a look at what Canada holds for you in 2025. So on my screen, you can see the map of Canada with all its provinces and territories, beautiful at laid. Then you can see the map of Canada, which, the calendar map represents represented by leaf, which is the leaf of hope, is the maple leaf. Or when Canada was initially discovered, it was known for its maple tree, where maple syrup was being produced. When Christopher Columbus arrived Canada, anyway, history says he arrived Canada by error. As a sailor, he set his compass to go to India. He said rather than set his compass to go to the east, he mistakenly set his compass to go to the west, and he ended up in a place which is today Canada. So the people he met in Canada, he rather called them Indians. That's why still today you can see a group of people they call the Indians in Canada, but they are actually the Aboriginal, the original owners of the land of Canada. So coming to Canada, it was more or less a village of maple. So the word Kanata, which is a village, is from where the word Canada was coined out from. So Canada, in perspective, what are the reasons one would really want to consider Canada? Canada has got 10 provinces. When you talk about provinces, they are like, in some countries, they'll call them states. Like in the US, they are referred to as states. In Canada, they are provinces. Territories have the same, perhaps, authority and status as province. But the provinces were actually created by referendum of the people who live in that province. Some of them existed outside the Union of Canada until lately. Some of them were already existing as independent provinces before they voted to join the Union. So the provinces from the west coast of British Columbia up to the Atlantic, where you have places like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Prince Edward, Newfoundland and Labrador, then Prince Edward. So you have a stretch across a very large landmass. So these provinces they are semi-autonomous. They administer themselves, but the central government also has have oversight function on the things that border on the provinces. But for the territories, They don't have enough population to be able to do a referendum to administer themselves as an independent province. So they were created by federal fiat. So the federal government created these territories and they are administered from the center. So you have 3 territories of that nature and you have 10 provinces. Usually, the provinces are the ones in the north, like the Yukon, Northwest Territory, and Nunavut. They have so much landmass, but very few people. So the provinces are British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward. So if you look at the map of Canada, you discover that it stretches over a very large landmass of about 9,984,670 square kilometers. This landmass is about 1.6 times the landmass of US. And that's why it uses 6 different time zones, starting from the Pacific time zone in the west up to the Newfoundland and Labrador time on the east. So from people who lived in the west coast, they are 5.5 hours behind those who live in the east coast. So with these 6 time zones, you see how the stretch of Canada, it could take up to 6-7 hours to fly from one end to the other end, assuming you are flying as the crow flies. So with such a landmass, it's surprising to know that Canada has just a population of 39 million people, which is just about 11.1% of the population of US. US standing population starting at about 343 million people at the moment. In the just concluded election, the Liberal Party renewed its mandate for another 4 years. So it's governed by the Liberal Party via a parliamentary system of government. So McCartney is the current Prime Minister of Canada. The Canada central government is patterned after the United Kingdom Parliament, a style of government where the party with the majority in Parliament forms the government and administer the people through an executive which is a creation of the Parliament led by the Prime Minister. So the Liberal Party regained power, and the Liberal Party is a party that has been very positively disposed to immigration. In the space of the last 5 years, the Canadian population has moved from about 34 million to 39 million today. The Liberal Party is very pro to immigration. But in the last couple of 1 year, as a run-up to the election, the leading opposition, which is the Conservative Party, and many other interests in Canada, tried to raise the issue of the fact that the borders were becoming too porous, immigration was becoming too easy, coming to Canada was becoming too easy, and that also allowed not the very best and the very brightest to come in. So in the wake of the election, there was some rejigging of the immigration system. Because of that, they had to reduce annual influx or invitation to migrate to Canada to just 1% of the population on a yearly basis. That still puts it at about 390,000 persons will be invited to settle in Canada as permanent residents. So that's the beauty about the Canadian system. The coming to Canada or going to Canada is not like a knee-jerk reflex. It's not like a 100-meter dash. It's a marathon that one has to continue to walk its way through, because ultimately, when you are brought into Canada via the permanent resident route, you are completely settled. You are fully settled into the country, that you do not need to apply for visas again. You don't need to bother yourself about what will be my next visa application plan, what next will I do to keep my stay in Canada. And if you put in 1,095 completed days within the country from the day you started living in the country with your permanent resident, you are free to apply for the Canadian passport, which I'm sure you already know how powerful it is. Canadian passport can take you to 187 countries without having to apply for visas. And that puts it a little bit more powerful than the United States passport. Now, the Canada, if you look at the map and you superimpose it on the map of the United States, you discover that Canada shares border with the 12 northern states of the United States, all the way from Seattle to the East Coast in New York, New Jersey, and Vermont. So Canada is such a wide country. And because of the pledge to bring in about 1% of the population every year, government is rapidly expanding infrastructure and expanding social services. Because of that, also to further expand the economic base of Canada, they also therefore bringing in skilled, what they refer to as the skilled workers. So government is making so much effort. If you look at the landmass of Canada, it therefore means that Canada can take close to 500 million people and still have sufficient space to take more. If it's almost times 2 of the landmass of US and only currently has about 11% of the US population of about nearly 350 million people, you can imagine what more Canada can take. That is why the migration process to Canada is not a dash, it's a marathon that you have to quietly, patiently follow up, and ultimately there's space for everyone. I will say that again. There is space for each and everyone. All you just need to do is to scale yourself up to meet with the requirements of becoming, a permanent resident based on the qualifications set out by the Canadian government. Like you see, the pledge to invite 1% of our population as PRO annually is amounting to 390,000 persons being invited to apply as permanent residents. Like I said earlier, perhaps you need to understand the fact that this is a reduction from what it has always been. So because of that, there's also a streamlining of the process for those who we need to qualify. Because of that, Canada is opening up new programs, which for them haven't come up with the statistics of what actually the migration demands of the country. They have decided to narrow it to specific needs of theirs. So they will, based on those needs, launch programs. Those programs usually don't stay forever. If you have followed up the trajectory with which Canada has done its immigration policies, you discover that at a point, the Federal Skilled Workers Program was what was in vogue, what everybody was, until sometime in 2012 when they had to move it to the express entry. Creating the express entry, they created other pathways like the provincial nomination, where a province can, on its own, based on their need for you, bring you into the province, in which case they expect you to live and develop that province until you have a passport of the country before you can move to any place to live or to work. The federal ski program is still running. The express entry program is still running. Every of these, whether federal ski or provincial nomination, channels itself through the express entry. Then you have other pathways, like if you have got a PhD, you can move into those pathways through the PhD stream. They have the spousal stream and all whatnot. So basically, the Canadian government has now streamlined the process of migration. Some of them will start you out on a work permit and perhaps leave you there for 2 years and ask you and tell you can be qualified to apply for permanent residence by virtue of the fact that you have worked and lived in Canada. Some could come into the student route. But in the last rejigging of the immigration system after the election, the issue of students coming into Canada has been greatly downplayed. You remember that in the last 5 years, especially during the COVID era, people can come into Canada with a visitor's visa, stay back in Canada, ask to be converted to be given work permit. From work permit, they'll move to permanent resident. That existed in the last 5 years. But as of 25th of August last year, that stopped. As at 25th of March this year, they terminated the process of you having to qualify in the express entry with the help of an arranged job. So to better, position themselves for what they call the proper migration, they decided, okay, let's open up new channels to see that our immigration process is targeted at the needs of the country. So that's how government came up with new programs in 5 provinces. And when I say provinces and territories, some territories, some are territories, some are approved, but they have got equal powers. But one thing that is central to all of this is that whenever any of these provinces, whenever any of these territories nominate you, or you get a job with them and they say, okay, you can be invited, you qualify to be invited as a to apply for the permanent residence of Canada, it is the central government of Canada that is actually going to invite you, but on behalf of that province. So, though the provinces are semi-autonomous, there are some things that have been kept in the exclusive list. For those who live in Nigeria and some presidential style of government, you realize that there are some things they call the exclusive list, where only the federal or central government can legislate on them. Things like currency, things like military, and then immigration. For Canada, immigration. So even when you get invited or get nominated by a province, you still have to put in your papers through the IRCC. IRCC is Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship, Canada. That is the central body. It's the centralized intake office in Nova Scotia. This centralized office is what still process your visa and everything. So in that case, even when, for example, you are nominated by the British Columbia, it is the central government that will still process your permanent residence and your stay in Canada. So in which case, you're holding the PR of Canada permits you to still go to anywhere in Canada, but you are usually told to remain in your province if you are nominated by the province for the purpose for which you were nominated, for the period you're supposed to put in. And for the PRO, from the day you accept to your PRO, your permanent residence is approved, you are given your COPRO, which is Certificate of Permanent Residence. If you're living abroad, you are made to submit your passport for a visa that will permit you to fly into Canada. From the day you come into Canada, you are landed. From that COPRO to your traveling, you have 6 months to still plan your time, but after 6 months, you have to reapply if you do not travel. So you must travel within 6 months into Canada and get landed. From the day you land, if you put in 1,095 completed days post your residency in Canada, you are qualified to apply for the citizenship. So these programs that are opened up is the reason we are feeling that, okay, let's see how we can assist people to take advantage of it and see how they can push the process to a logical conclusion. Now, where does 6M come in? So as a responsible organization, we have some modest records in immigration to a large extent. And yours sincerely, I speak to you. Also a product of 6M, and to the glory of God, I'm speaking to you from Canada. So what we can help you do is to walk you through the process. In walking you through the process, we will have to guide you through, verify your credentials with the appropriate agencies, how to do them, how to go about them. You pay the necessary fees to those bodies, they verify them for you. By the time you do that, we also guide you through which appropriate language test to do, how to prepare for those language tests, how to have good performance in them, what level of success or pass do you have in them. Then the cruise of it, which is the next stage, would be to having verified your credentials, having put your language in perspective, having been able to demonstrate that, oh, you are proficient in such a language. Suffice to mention that Canada is bilingual. Canada is official language in Canada is English and French. So whichever one you choose to go with, by the time you choose the language you need to be proficient in, that will also be able to guide on which of the provinces do you have more advantage in applying for jobs. It will even also be more advantageous if you choose there, for example, to take the English and the French exam. That, again, further makes you more employable. That's what Canada calls adaptability. Adaptability is an assessment of how you will readily be able to settle in Canada without being under intense pressure. So if you are bilingual, for example, you're able to speak English, you're able to speak French, that makes your adaptability higher, and the possibility of you being invited as a permanent resident, becomes higher. Then after you have a job offer, the job offer remains, with you. It's not doesn't translate to anything until you get a nomination by the virtue of this job employment to say, okay, this is a special class of job. This that has been approved by the federal government for this province. So this province has therefore employed this person. And based on this employment, we're asking you to nominate this person and invite this person. So they will issue you an invitation to apply. That ITA is what you will now require to put in your application. We can guide you through the process of how to convert your job offer to, to a nomination. And by the time that is done, you have 60 days to turn in your visa application, because the visa application process for permanent resident is quite complex, it's tedious and time consuming. You have to do a lot of things. You have to seek police clearance from every country where you have lived for more than 6 months, including your country of birth, whether you have lived there or not. As long as you were born there, you get a police clearance. You need to get all your details, academic records. You need to get everything about you, because it's like you are transferring your status from wherever you have ever, from where you have ever lived to Canada. Because by the time Canada profiles you and gives you permanent residence, it means you are safe enough to, one, live in Canada, and secondly, to become a citizen of Canada. So CSM can also guide you through this process, and ultimately, by the time you are successful, by God's grace, we can also offer some assistance, for you to settle down, accommodation, school for kids, and getting integrated into the society, adapting to the cultural shock that will likely come, changing weather, and all of that. So we can help, guide through all of that. Now, all that CSM is going to do, CSM is not the consular. We don't work with the IRCC. We are not an employee of any of the provinces. We are not an employee of any of the agencies of Canada. We are an independent company that have understudied the immigration process of Canada and other countries, and are able to guide you to doing what you're supposed to do for the government of Canada to give you a smooth passage, rite of passage into Canada. So I want to thank you for your time, and we want to ask you for your comments, questions, and we can be reached via secretary@csmgrl.org. That's our email. Then our phone number, you can reach us through that. So